For more, let's bring in ABC News contributor and former Assistant Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Elizabeth Neumann. Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining me. So I want to start with this because you and others have made the case that the U.S. removed Maduro and it's raising legal questions, strategic concerns as well. What are your specific concerns about the legality of this operation?
It's not clear, based on what has come out of Congress, that Congress has ever briefed appropriately. There are even some members of Congress who say that they were lied to, that they explicitly asked questions about whether this type of activity was being planned. And we now know that it has been planned for 6 months. They've had plans underway. Now, the president didn't give the order until a week or two ago, but nevertheless, it does appear that the administration was keeping Congress in the dark, and that is in contradiction to the Constitution. It is only Congress that is allowed to authorize the use of military force. And while this has been labeled a law enforcement action where they had FBI on the ground to do the arrests, it still was a military action. Bombs were dropped. Military ships we have 10,000 troops off the coast of Venezuela. Congress needed to be involved in this decision.
And it also raises the question, if troops are needed in the future for this transition of power, then what, too? I also want to ask you about the precedent this could set, using military force to capture a sitting head of state on his own soil.
Now, look, we and 60 other countries do not believe that Maduro is the duly elected leader. He has basically flouted 2 election cycles and has taken over the country. So on one hand, he's not the head of state. On the other hand, it makes it really hard for us or the West in general to push back against Russian aggression in Ukraine or Chinese aggression in Taiwan if we're willing to do this without going through the appropriate processes, without getting authorization from Congress, without going to the United Nations and using that tool to force Maduro into some sort of action where he could have been arrested and tried. So it definitely removes some of our moral high ground that the United States has enjoyed in the past, and it is going to make the world a more dangerous place.
As Secretary Rubio made the case, though, that because of this type of operation, the element of surprise that was needed, that it wasn't the type of thing that you could notify Congress of in advance. And they're also making the case that there is this imminent threat that we've had for years and going forward about drugs and cartels and potential violence coming into the United States. What would your response be to that? And do you think that this operation will have any effect on the drug trade and illegal immigration, for that matter, coming into the U.S.?
Yeah, Congress definitely has at times posed a challenge with leaks, but the Gang of Eight could have been briefed, and it sounds like the Gang of Eight was not briefed. That's a group of a small group of senators and congressmen who are on the intelligence committees, and they don't have a track record of leaking, so that could have been done. As to the consequences beyond, I think that's the thing that causes me the most alarm. Look, the military did an amazing job. They extradited him. We have some casualties, but nobody was killed in action on the U.S. side. So the military is amazing at doing this. My concern is not the military plans. My concern is, what is the plan for the next day? And what we saw in that press conference yesterday was that there is no plan. You have the president saying one thing. Earlier today, Secretary Rubio was interviewed by our George Stephanopoulos, and it was very clear that Rubio has a different interpretation of what is next than what the president was saying yesterday. So there's confusion. It causes confusion around the globe. It causes confusion in Venezuela. And all of that is going to lead to more instability. And we historically don't have a good track record with regime change. And most of us think about Iraq or Afghanistan, but the United States actually has a long history of trying to meddle in Latin American affairs. During the Cold War, there were at least 18 attempts at regime change. None of those led to stable democracies. None of those benefited the United States. In fact, it led to more instability, more mass migration flows. So the lack of planning here of what to do after you've captured Maduro is very alarming to me. It tells me that the people in charge are not thinking clearly. They're not acting wisely. They're not students of history to understand what needed to be set in place in order for this to not turn out to be another disaster, another destabilization of another Latin American country.
Elizabeth Neumann, thank you for your time. We do appreciate it.